It is Tuesday, February 22nd, and you are watching Right on Cue College Sports. Welcome back. Thanks for checking us out again. This is Right on Cue College Sports, and I'm your host, Tyson Quiller. Can't express how grateful I am for all of your support, for the engagement. We're starting to get some comments, some likes. Some people have sent a little bit of feedback to the email in our mailbag there. Don't forget, subscribe to the channel on YouTube. We are still in the works of trying to put together an audio-only version of this content so you can consume it if you would prefer, just in an audio-only format. And again, keep in mind, we have the email rightonqcs@gmail.com. The letter Q, right on, letter Q, C, and S at gmail.com. What an incredible, amazing weekend of college basketball we just saw. We are coming down the final stretch here, 3 weeks until Selection Sunday. And let's just go ahead and kick it off with the big game out of the Big Ten that we previewed for you last week. Number 12, Illinois traveling to number 19, Michigan State. Michigan State is a squad that really struggled early in the season, kind of resurrected and righted the ship in the last several weeks. And now they're starting to look a little suspect again. Of course, you have Kofi Cockburn going for 27 points, 9 rebounds. He is now number 7 in the country in scoring and also number 7 in the country in total rebounds. He seems to have probably locked up the Big Ten Player of the Year at this point, especially as you've seen Johnny Davis from Wisconsin waning a little bit down the stretch here. Travion Williams has kind of fallen off. Really, it's probably going to come down to Kofi Cockburn and Jaden Ivey from Purdue, but I think Cockburn is well out in front at this point. Now, in this game specifically, though, the star guard, Andre Curbelo, was still on a minutes restriction because of an injury. He's still nursing back. But in his absence, Jacob Grandison came up huge, especially in the first half. He finished the game with 24 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. Illinois probably has the deepest backcourt in all of college basketball. It's just next man up. They play a 4-guard, 1 center, being Kofi Cockburn, set in most cases. And, I mean, they go 7 deep with these guards. Consistent production, consistent play. Michigan State is the 14th best three-point shooting team in the country by three-point field goal percentage. But they were completely flat in the first half. They shot just 15%. Really dug themselves a hole. Marcus Bingham and Gabe Brown combined for just 8 points in the game. They averaged 21 on the season. And so once they had dug themselves that hole, they were trailing by 12 at halftime. But in the second half, the junior guard, Tyson Walker, great name, Tyson Walker, just went off for Sparty. He's a bench dude. He's a dude who's not seen a lot of playing time. He goes for 26 points, 17 of those in the second half, and 5 big assists, as Michigan State's bench pulled them all the way back to within 2 points off of Tyson Walker, a big three-pointer that he drained with about 2.5 minutes left in the game. And so it was looking like this is a straight-up contest. Illinois looked like they were shot. They were running out of steam. But the Illini are 15th in the country in rebound margin, and they just really flexed their muscle. The big guys asserted their dominance, and they really got pretty much every loose ball from that point forward. The guard Trent Frazier from Illinois played really well down the stretch. Sparty had kind of one last gasp. They had pulled themselves to within 3 points with about 30 seconds left in the game, and Trent Frazier just hit a dagger three-pointer, and it was over from there. They whittled it away. Illinois, I had picked them in the picks I gave you. Illinois by 8. They end up winning by 5. Not bad on that pick. Next, we had the big battle for the Lone Star State. Number 11, Texas Tech, rolled into number 20, Texas, and got the win 61-55. These are two teams that have just excellent defenses. They're both top 15 scoring defenses in the country, and both of their offenses really seem to be kind of coming on in the last few weeks. This game was everything it was hyped up to be. It was deadlocked at 28 at halftime. So much emotion. The crowd was going crazy. The Red Raiders came out hot in the second half, and they built up a big 12-point lead, really kind of silencing the crowd, removing the crowd from the dynamic behind really solid play from the backcourt. Adonis Arms finished with 10 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists. Big time, okay? However, Texas then made a furious comeback, and that gym got about as loud as it could get in the last 4 minutes of the game, fueled by some scorching hot shooting from Andrew Jones, who finished with 20 points. Jones hit a three to pull the Longhorns to within 1 point with about a minute 37 left in the game. But Tech was just far too mature, far too team-oriented and efficient in the last minute and a half of the game. They made 5 of 7 free throws in that stretch, while Texas missed their last 5 shots in a row. Jones was really kind of the only real offensive spark plug for Texas. He's the only player that finished in double-digit scoring for the Longhorns. So again, the Texas offense kind of disappeared. For Texas Tech, Bryson Williams was fantastic. He didn't really have a stretch that he commanded the game, but he was very consistent throughout. 17 points, 6 rebounds, and what's probably most impressive, only 1 turnover. When this Texas Tech squad doesn't turn the ball over, they could potentially be a Final Four squad. And then obviously the guard, Clarence Nadolny, is quickly becoming a very strong piece off the bench for this Red Raider squad. He contributed another 14 points and 3 rebounds. Texas ends the season, so they have 2 games coming up against unranked opponents. They end the season hosting number 10 Baylor and then at number 5 Kansas at Fog Allen. That's a murderer's row last 2 games for them. Meanwhile, Texas Tech doesn't play another ranked team until through the end of the regular season. So Texas Tech is really kind of set up to only move up in the bracketology at this point. I did want to take 1 minute and just address something that I think is really incredible. I had kind of forgotten about it until I was discussing it with my dad this weekend. But Andrew Jones, the guard for the Longhorns, you forget because they don't cover it all that often. 2 years ago, he set out an entire year of college basketball because in his sophomore year, he was battling leukemia. He was receiving radiation treatment, chemotherapy, and now here he is coming back and performing on the big stage. Really pretty incredible. Now, last week I gave you Texas Tech by 3 on the road in this one. They won by 6. If you're keeping count at home, that's 2-0 for Tyson on the week. Then we had the big game in the SEC, one of the big games in the SEC. Number 25, Alabama, super streaky, one of the highest three-point shooting teams in the country, traveling to Kentucky, who's number 4 in the country. This game was a complete offensive explosion in the first half. Both teams just flat out couldn't miss. It was so exciting. At halftime, Alabama had 46 points and were trailing because Kentucky poured in 47 in the first half. Both of these teams were just about on pace to hit 100 points in the game. Really incredible, excellent offensive efficiency. For Alabama, Keon Ellis dropped in 6 3-pointers in the first half. He finished with 28 points in the game. Just a studly performance out of a guy that Alabama generally relies on Quinterly and Shackelford. So to get production out of Keon Ellis is really going to be big for them coming down the stretch and entering into the NCAA tournament. Alabama made 14 3-pointers in total. And Kentucky, so contrast that with the fact that Kentucky only took 14 3-pointers. Alabama made 14 3-pointers. That's the secret weapon for this Crimson Tide squad that keeps them competitive in really any game. Or, on the flip side of that, if they're not making their threes, they can get blown out by just about anybody. The Tide played the game that they wanted to play really throughout this one. Unfortunately for them, the three-point shooting kind of dried up and dropped off a little bit in the second half. Jahan Quinterly finished 0 for 4 from the three-point line, and Jaden Shackelford, who made 3 3-pointers in the first half, went just 2 for 9 in the second half. That really kind of shot the horse of their comeback, of their sticking with this high-octane Kentucky offense. But they made Kentucky sweat it for sure. Alabama gave them all that they had. Kentucky leads the nation in rebound margin, and similarly to Texas Tech, they just really asserted their dominance later in the second half. The Wildcats played much better defense in the second half, also holding Alabama to just 35 points after giving up 46 in the first half. Oscar Tshiebwe did what Oscar Tshiebwe does, 21 points, 14 rebounds. That's his 9th double-double in a row, 9 games in a row. He has 21 on the season. So that caused me to do a little bit of research. The NCAA record for single-season double-doubles is 31, which I was a little bit shocked by. It doesn't seem like Tshiebwe is going to be able to get there. But that was, of course, David Robinson from Navy, 1986. The most recent outstanding double-double season was Michael Beasley, Kansas State. He had 28 of them in 2008. So really, Sheboy's doing kind of something that hasn't been done in 12 years, really. So it's kind of a once in a decade occurrence, and that's for double doubles. He's still on pace to be the single season NCAA record holder for rebounds per game. So for rebound, I mean, there was a 2-game stretch in December where he got 29 rebounds in one game, and the next game he got 30 rebounds. I mean, this dude is just a monster. I saw a story about him moving up people's NBA draft boards. I would think so. Your favorite NBA team, they want to pick up Oscar Tshiebwe. But Shamir Wheeler didn't play in this game for Kentucky. He's kind of their straw that stirs the drink at point guard. But Kellen Grady and Keon Brooks were just sensational again. These two are really coming on as strong supplemental pieces for Kentucky, especially in the absence of Ty Washington, the freshman phenom, and when he's playing limited minutes. They combined Kellen Grady and Keon Brooks combined for 43 points, 11 rebounds, and 5 assists in the game. A ton of production. And they combined to shoot 58% from the field. So, I mean, Alabama tried the strategy of making the support crew, the role players, if you will, beat them, and they stepped up and they did it. Kellen Grady hit 7 3-pointers in the game. The dude was unconscious at one point in time. These are massive developments for this team, like I said. I would say go ahead and mark Kentucky in your Elite Eight. I think they're a safe bet to make the Elite Eight at this point. Alabama has the second toughest strength of schedule in the country. So even though they have 10 losses now, they're still projected to be a 5 seed in the NCAA tournament. In this game, I gave you Kentucky by 15. They ended up winning by 9. Alabama played a lot better than I thought they would. Final score on this one, 90-81. Kentucky gets the dub at home. Then the other big SEC matchup, number 16 Tennessee, coming off of just beating down Kentucky earlier in the week, rolled into number 23 Arkansas. And man, this Arkansas defensive squad is just really becoming elite right before our eyes. Eric Musselman has them playing exceptional defense, collecting all the loose balls, collecting all of the 50-50 rebounds. They are playing outstanding defense. After giving up 75 points or more 9 times earlier this year, they're now only giving up 57 points per game in their last 4 games since they knocked off number 1 Auburn at home. So they're really strong down the stretch here. They've won 12 of their last 13 games, and more importantly, they've also covered 12 of their last 13 games, which means they're under the radar. This is a team you're going to probably want to pick. They're going to go further than people think in the NCAA tournament, being the Arkansas Razorbacks. They forced Tennessee into 15 turnovers. They fouled out Josiah Jordan-James and collected 4 fouls on Kennedy Chandler and on Vescovy, their star guard. So outstanding defense. Really, for Tennessee, a bit concerning because their offense just dried up completely. Arkansas got the win 58-48. Held Tennessee to just 48 points. J.D. Note and Jalen Williams for Arkansas really drove the offense. They had 13 points apiece, but scoring was really pretty limited in this game for both teams. But as for J.D. Note and Jalen Williams, they got to the line when they needed to get to the line. Got the easy free throws. The Razorbacks are 4th in the country in free throw attempts. That's another indication that they might overperform in the NCAA tournament. They're averaging 22 free throw attempts per game, and they had 22 free throw attempts in this game, and they hit 17 of them, which is a pretty good clip from the free throw line. As for Tennessee, I mean, this is a far cry from their last performance on Tuesday, 1 week ago today, when they hung 76 points and beat Kentucky by 13. The Vols shot just 27% in this game from the field and just 16% from the 3-point line. Really anemic. The dude that was the spark plug in the Kentucky games, Zakai Ziegler, he scored 12 points in this one, but he was nowhere near the spark that they saw and that they had at home against Kentucky a week ago today. Tennessee is going to need to get the offensive woes figured out in their next game against Missouri because they host number 3 Auburn on Saturday. And Auburn can score the rock. The road doesn't get much easier for Arkansas either. They are at Florida tonight. Florida just beat Auburn, and then they're hosting Kentucky on Saturday. Things just get tougher and tougher in the SEC. In this one, I gave you Arkansas in an upset at home by 4. Arkansas won by 10. For those keeping score at home, that's 4-0 on the weekend for Tyson. Now we turn to the Mountain West. And after Wyoming lost last week to New Mexico, my Lobos, my alma mater, the Colorado State Rams traveled there and they beat down the Lobos pretty solidly by 15. CSU at that point was kind of looking like they were the class of the Mountain West until this past Saturday. And they go and they lost by 11 at UNLV. So is Wyoming back at the top of the conference? Well, they hosted Air Force, a team that they only beat by 2 in Colorado Springs earlier this year, and they got the dub 75-67. This was a close one, but the Cowboys led pretty much wire to wire. It was like a 5 to 7 point game. They won the first half by 4. They won the second half by 4. That added together makes your 8-point win. Very consistent play throughout for the Cowboys. Graham Ike was a perfect 11 for 11 from the field. He finished with 27 points and 12 rebounds. Wyoming remains a top 25 field goal percentage team in the country on offense, which means they're working to get very good looks at the basket on the offensive end. And then Hunter Maldonado bounced back from that New Mexico loss where he just completely disappeared. He got 29 points and 8 assists in this game. He was aggressive. He got to the free throw line, shot 11 free throws. That's the kind of basketball Wyoming plays when they're successful, when they win consistently. Wyoming also got the Falcons into foul trouble early. 2 Falcons players fouled out. Air Force had twice as many fouls committed in the game as Wyoming did. The Cowboys were really forcing the issue. This is something that I think the head coach Jeff Linder was kind of emphasizing for his squad coming off of that loss to New Mexico. I think it's safe to say Jeff Linder's been probably the best coach in the Mountain West this year. Nico Medved at CSU is probably second, but the transition from last year to this year for Wyoming has really been pretty remarkable. The Cowboys haven't lost 2 games in a row all year, and they have a big matchup tomorrow night against Colorado State at Moby. So that's going to be a huge showdown and very fun to watch. Again, Wyoming got the win over Air Force 75-67. I gave you Wyoming at home by 8. Guess what? They won by 8. Perfect 5-0 so far on the weekend for your boy here. Then San Diego State traveled to Fresno State. Fresno State has been a sneaky good team. It's really tough to win on the road amongst kind of the top tier teams in the Mountain West. Fresno State, San Diego State, Boise State, Wyoming, and Colorado State. Well, San Diego State said, no, it's not that tough to win on the road. They got the dub 61-44. Fresno State did a masterful job of defending Matt Bradley, which I really kind of thought seemed to be San Diego State's only real threat on offense. He's really the only player, I thought, that could create off of the dribble, create his own shots without having to run offensive sets. They held Matt Bradley, did Fresno State, to just 1 of 8 shooting in this game. He finished with 2 points on the evening. Also, San Diego State took Orlando Robinson out of the game. Just 9 points on 3 of 10 shooting, forced him into 4 turnovers. Really elite defense played by both squads here. Basically, Fresno State's only offense was Isaiah Hill, who made 4 3-pointers. He was the only player in double-digit scoring for Fresno State. Fresno State has now lost 4 games in a row. I don't know if you recall, a couple weeks ago, I did that kind of preview of the road ahead for Mountain West teams. Fresno State has underperformed what I thought they would even do, and I said they would struggle to make the NIT tournament. They've now lost 4 games in a row. Things are really heading in kind of a bad direction for this squad. I think they need to really do some soul searching because they have a tough schedule to finish out here before the conference tournament. As for San Diego State, with Matt Bradley being smothered, like I said, I didn't know who was going to step up. Well, the sophomore, Chad Baker Mazzara from the Dominican Republic, welcome to the show, young man. Averaging 6 points and 2 rebounds per game coming in, he put up a big 20 points and 3 rebounds. He matched Isaiah Hill's 4 3-pointers on the night. The Aztecs are now Joe Lunardi's last team into the tourney, so we now have 4 Mountain West Conference teams in the NCAA tournament. So pretty impressive weekend for the Mountain West all around. They have San Diego State a big matchup at Boise State tonight. That's going to be one that I think San Diego State needs to win to secure their spot in the NCAA tournament. I gave you San Diego State at home or on the road here by 5 over Fresno State, and they won by 17. So that was a safe win. So I went a perfect 6-0 on the weekend. Add that to our previous few weeks we've been keeping track of. We're now 29-9 in our weekend picks, 76%. Things are really improving. We're climbing in our percentage here as the picture is getting a little more clear as to where these teams stand. And now, of course, you knew I had to talk about it. The game on Sunday that you've probably seen all over sports media, Michigan traveling to Wisconsin. Just a quick run through of what happened in the game. Wisconsin gets the dub at home, 77-63. That's a 14-point win there. This was a game that was tied at halftime. Wisconsin's offense was just unstoppable in the second half. All 5 starters for the Badgers scored in double digits. Johnny Davis finished with 25 points and 6 rebounds on 65% shooting. A solid performance out of him. Chucky Hepburn had 4 big assists from the point. The Badgers have really solidified their postseason rotation. It's going to be Kroll and Wall in the front court, Vogt off the bench, and that's kind of your front court rotation, 3 players. And then in the back court, Hepburn, Davis, and Davison are your 3 starters, and Jacoby Neath coming off the bench. So really, you've got 7 guys, and that's really what these teams are going to start doing, or what the teams that are successful, what they start doing is as the season goes on, you pare down from 9 to 8 to 7. Probably around 7 is your good rotation for the conference tournament and following into the NCAA tournament. Wisconsin only faces one more ranked opponent, which is Purdue on March 1st. They do play at Rutgers, though, on February 26th, and Rutgers has been kind of hot fire as of late. And now let's turn our eye to this Michigan Wolverine squad. I mean, it's kind of the manifestation of what has been going on with this team. There's a real lack of leadership. They don't have consistent play in the backcourt. In this game specifically, they just made 16% from 3-point range and just had way too many turnovers late. Musa Diabate, who's supposed to be one of their big role players, had just 3 points. And Diabate and Eli Brooks were in foul trouble pretty much the whole game. And that leads us kind of into the big story here. So according to the Big Ten, this was a clear violation of Big Ten Conference sportsmanship policy. What you're going to see in the video when you look at the clip is that there's a confrontation between the 2 coaches, and basically that escalates into some pushing. Greg Gard grabs Juwan Howard by the arms. Juwan Howard pulls his arms away, puts his finger in Greg Gard's face. It's all very kind of typical basketball push around things until the crowd kind of gets in between the 2 coaches and they get pushed apart a little bit. And then Juwan Howard, who is a big man, he played in the NBA, reaches up and over like he's going to punch, but opens his hand, and we have an open hand contact slap to the side of the head of a Wisconsin assistant coach. Really, that kind of escalated things up to the next notch. As the coaches were separated, then you had players getting into scuffles. There were players who threw legitimate punches. I'm not saying Juwan Howard threw a punch. It was an open hand slap to the side of the head. But there were players that absolutely then viewed that escalation, got involved, and I just think it was a really poor example Juwan Howard set for the situation for the players, really on both sides. It got really out of hand. My understanding of what the argument was is that it had to do with a timeout that was called with about 15 seconds left in the game by Wisconsin. Now, you hear this all the time in baseball, but apparently there's some concept of some unwritten rule, and Juwan Howard was upset because Wisconsin was up, 15 points at this point. And so, why would you be calling timeout with 15 points? Just run the clock out. And when Greg Gard was interviewed about it after the game, he spoke to basically by calling the timeout, it advanced the ball to the front court so they didn't have to worry about kind of a 10-second backcourt violation. If you're in that camp and you sympathize with Juwan Howard as far as this being disrespectful, you also have to then kind of come up with an explanation as to why Juwan Howard had his team in a full court press defense when Wisconsin had all of their backups in and you're down 15 points, right? I mean, wouldn't you also be saying, well, let's dribble out the clock and be done? Michigan was clearly trying to steal the ball, score. Also, Jace Howard, the son of Juwan Howard, scored a basket when this game was well out of hand with 1 second left. So, I mean, basically completely undefended. Wisconsin just let him go right by because they were done. They had won the game. And he scores a basket. I mean, there's a lot of ticky-tack things in here that could be maybe be considered disrespectful. I don't think any of it justifies the reaction that really either coach had about it, because Greg Gard's reaction was feeling disrespected because Juwan Howard didn't shake his hand. I mean, it's like you as head coaches need to be the grown-ups in the room. You know, in a competitive endeavor, these are young student athletes who are, it's not quite obviously as physical as football, but they're physically combating with each other in these games. Emotions are running very high. You know, your role, part of your role as a coach is to be calming them down, bringing them back to reason, telling them, like, let the other guy get out of hand, he'll get a technical. We don't need to match that behavior, right? And so for the person that you have entrusted in that role to be as irresponsible as both of these coaches were, but especially Juwan Howard, I think is very concerning. Ultimately, Juwan Howard was handed down from the Big Ten a 5-game suspension, which means he won't be coaching on the sideline through the end of the regular season, but will be back for the Big Ten tournament. I'm not going to really get into whether I think that's acceptable or not. I think the main factor was that Juwan Howard should have had more of a suspension than Wisconsin's Greg Gard, and Greg Gard did not get suspended. He had, like, I think, $100,000 fine. So, I mean, I think it's fine, and we move on. If you are a Michigan fan, maybe, maybe that's one of those things. It's been a really poor season. Michigan played a really poor game, really sloppy, really undisciplined, and then it's capped off with this really sloppy, really undisciplined into the game situation. So, I'll leave it up to Michigan fans to discuss what their thoughts about Juwan Howard are. But those are kind of my thoughts. We also have Musa Diabate and Terrence Williams from Michigan, who are going to be suspended for 1 game. Those are 2 players. And Wisconsin's Jacoby Neath will be suspended for a game as well. Michigan is currently in Joe Lunardi's last 4 in, which continues to completely baffle me. They have but this is really kind of the only justification. They have the 4th toughest strength of schedule in the country. So I suppose, you say, well, they play a lot of tough teams. Yeah, but they pretty much lose to all of them. So, I don't know what is to be said about that. But again, that is what keeps them kind of in the tournament hunt. Michigan faces 3 of their next 5 games are against ranked opponents. So things are going to get pretty tricky for the Wolverines without Musa Diabate, who is a big role player, and their head coach, Juwan Howard, on the sideline. So now let's pivot here. Let's take a quick look at some of the action that took place this weekend that is impacting the bubble situation, as we're now, 3 weeks away from Selection Sunday. And by the way, for Colorado fans, you're wanting these teams to lose, okay? If you're going to scratch your way back into the NCAA tournament, you need these teams to be losing. Well, Florida said, screw you, Colorado. They pull off a big win over number 2 Auburn, 63-62. Florida is now 17-10 and in, as of now, to the NCAA tournament. They get number 18 Arkansas at home in their next game, and then they're at Kentucky. Next, in the Pac-12, Oregon lost a heartbreaker, 84-81 at number 3 Arizona. That probably would have sealed their tournament hopes if they were going to get in. If they would have beaten Arizona, I think they were certainly going to get into the tournament. But now the Ducks are 17-10 on the year. They're currently in the next four out of Joe Lunardi's bracketology, which means they're in that 4 to 8 range of teams that are just on the outside looking in. They host number 12 UCLA, and then they host number 16 USC this week. So they've got potential. They've got opportunities to move themselves into that tournament. Or if they lose both of those games, they're probably out for sure. Then Indiana lost at number 22 Ohio State, 80-69 in overtime. This was an exciting, fun game. Indiana played really hard through regulation. Then we got into overtime, and they got completely spanked. Obviously, they lost by 11 points. Indiana is now 16-10. They're viewed currently in the last four in the tournament. They only face one more ranked opponent. This is going to be one of those teams to keep your eye on. If you're a Colorado fan, if you're another bubble team fan, you need Indiana to lose another one or maybe even two games if you're going to keep your hopes alive. The last game of the season is when they finally play another ranked opponent, and that is at Purdue. Then also out of the Big Ten, Rutgers, who has just been surging. They won 4 games against ranked opponents before they lost finally this weekend at number 4 Purdue, 84-72. Again, like I said, that was after beating 4 ranked opponents in a row. Rutgers is now 16-10, and in the tourney, this is a team I see being in. Unlike Michigan, they're actually beating some of these teams that are comprising their extremely difficult strength of schedule. Big game tomorrow, Rutgers at Michigan. Both of those teams can make major statements about who's in and who's out in that game. Keep in mind, no head coach Juwan Howard, no Musa Diabate for Michigan in that game, but it is at home. Then Oklahoma got crushed at Iowa State, 75-54. They have now lost 3 games in a row. The Sooners are 14-13, and they're somehow considered still in the first 4 out, right on the bubble of the NCAA tournament. That's right. You heard me correctly. 1 game over 500. They lost 3 in a row. They play at Texas Tech tonight. I think they're going to get crushed in that, so we don't really have to worry about Oklahoma all that much longer. Then out of the Big East, Creighton beat Marquette. Both of these teams are probably looking at being bubble teams now. Creighton gets 83-82 win at Marquette, which was a pretty impressive win for them. They are now currently 18-8. Marquette has 10 losses, but a much more difficult strength of schedule. They have several better wins than does Creighton. So both of them are kind of viewed on probably a level playing field at this point as being just barely in the NCAA tournament. Creighton is at number 11, Providence, who now controls their destiny, by the way. Providence can win their first ever Big East championship if they just win the rest of their games, regular season Big East championship. But Creighton is at Providence, and then they host number 21, Connecticut, in their last 4 games. And now my Colorado Buffaloes, boy, they are coming on super hot. They don't get as much coverage because we're out west, but they are, almost as hot as Rutgers. Really, they crushed a very good Stanford squad, 70-53 over the weekend. Colorado has now won 5 games in a row after they had that terrible 3-game stretch where they lost to both Washington schools and then lost to Oregon at home. I was thinking that probably put the nail in the coffin. But, man, Tad Boyle has resurrected this bunch. They are keeping their tournament hopes alive. The Buffs are now 18-9, still not receiving really any bubble attention whatsoever, which really upsets me. But they host Arizona State this Thursday, and then they host number 2 Arizona on Saturday. If they win both of those, they're definitely in because of the win over Arizona. If they beat Arizona State, lose close to Arizona, they might have to go a couple rounds in the conference tournament to keep their hopes alive. Now, one last thing I want to remind you. Do not forget, 22-4 Colorado State Rams host the 21-4 Wyoming Cowboys at Moby Arena tomorrow night, 7 p.m., CBS Sports Network. Set your calendars. Go see if you can find some tickets. I was unable to find tickets. I'm really brokenhearted about it, but I'm going to be watching that game. And with all that being said, thanks again for checking us out on Right on Cue College Sports. I'm Tyson Quiller, and I appreciate you watching. We'll get at you next time.